Well, stays like this that NewsNation and the Donlon Report were made for. We have a busy day and a lot ahead for us tonight. We're going to talk about January 6th, of course. If you felt like that was the end of the world, or maybe if you felt like it wasn't, chances are you might be watching another network. But tonight, we are going to look at the facts of that day and talk about where we are as a country moving forward with perspective and civility. We also have new information on COVID. Even the president's advisors say his strategy should be, we need to learn to live with it. Something else we've been saying a lot on this broadcast. And another polarizing issue, albeit less serious, Antonio Brown. He threw some jabs at his now former team today. And former star running back Tiki Barber is here to weigh in on that. Big show on a big day. Glad to have you with us. The Donlon Report starts right now. So how will today be remembered? That's the pulse of America tonight. Some would put January 6th up there with other significant days in our country's history. December 7th, 1941, November 22nd, 1963, and of course, September 11th, 2001. Vice President Harris did that today. Others will not. So the question tonight, will you? Chances are that might depend on your point of view. And that has, unfortunately, 1 year later, continued to be another wedge issue dividing us. So, as we like to do here on this show and on this network, let's look at the facts. January 6th, no matter what you call it, a riot, an insurrection, was a national disgrace. It most certainly was not a tourist visit gone wild. And the whole thing has led to yet another wedge issue, election reform and voting rights. Republicans are making changes at the state level with opposition from Democrats. Democrats are trying to move on federal legislation with no help from the GOP. Now, as for the rioters themselves, they are being punished. 725 people from almost all 50 states have been charged, linked mainly by social media and support for former President Trump. 70 have had their cases adjudicated to date, and 31 will serve prison time. And despite the images and the video, despite what we all saw and felt that day as we watched the events unfold, they didn't come close to overturning the election. Our democratic institutions came under attack from a riotous mob for sure, but the institutions held up under pressure. Congress, besieged and battered, returned and did their duty certifying the vote count. Vice President Mike Pence recognized his constitutional duty was more than just ceremonial that day. He certified the vote, standing up to pressure from the former president for the good of the country. So democracy held up in those disputed states as well, where GOP officials and lawmakers certified their electoral votes despite complaints and unsuccessful lawsuits from former President Trump and his team. Judges looked at the facts and rejected claims of a big steal. Even the Supreme Court said so. There was no evidence of a stolen election. Yet that remains another wedge issue. Democracy is not dying, despite the disturbing images it held up. Still, a recent poll found 83% of Americans are concerned about the future of democracy. And despite the facts, we can't agree on what to call the events of January 6th, let alone how to investigate it, or maybe even how to remember it. Here's a look at some of our broadcasts just from last night.
If that was an insurrection, guys, that was the most poorly planned, failed insurrection in the history of mankind.
Rick, you're living in an alternative universe. Rick, you're clearly living in an alternative universe. That is incomparable to any other thing that's happened in this country in recent memory and in recent times. And so
that is such an exaggeration of the facts. No one was trying to overthrow the government. I mean, that's the problem.
So that's where we were last night. How do we reconcile January 6th? Do we come to terms with it, or will it remain an issue that divides us? Joining us now, one of the voices we like to turn to in times like this, Reason Magazine's Robbie Suave. Robbie, it's great to have you as always. This was a tough day for me, and I think for a lot of people. It was hard to watch this. This is why we want to try to look at this with some perspective, not as much retrospective. Help us out on this.
Yeah, I was there a year ago. I covered the attack in person. I was horrified by what I saw. People smashing windows, storming the Capitol, climbing the walls. It was a dark and embarrassing day for our nation, and I hope everyone who vandalized the Capitol or engaged in trespassing receives an appropriate sentence, not an eternity in prison, not even maybe the prison sentences that I see some of them getting after serving 10 months of solitary confinement, but they should be punished according to what they did. It was a bad, very bad thing that happened. That should not be a partisan view. Everyone should condemn the horror that went on. It was not ordinary. It was not just like any other riot. It was very, very, very bad. I think we should be totally clear on that. And I think it is very reasonable to hold Trump largely responsible for it, given the things he said that ginned up that outraged mob. All of that said, I would not go as far as to say that I don't think our government was under threat of falling. The U.S. government was still going to continue on just fine. I don't think members of Congress's lives were actually in danger. I know some of them felt afraid, and you know, the system did work. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden was certified despite this mob interference because he did win the election. So there's a bit of, I think it's being underplayed how bad it was in many corners, and perhaps being overemphasized just what a dire threat to sort of democracy in an intangible sense that is, I'm not quite sure was the case.
Fair enough. You heard some of the clip from last night, Robbie. I guess that remains why this still divides us. We can't even agree on what to call this thing. And I guess the other point is that it just sort of feels like we won't have a resolution to this. Do you think we need one to sort of move forward as a country?
Well, in the immediate aftermath, everyone kind of agreed that it was bad. I mean, there were very sort of right-wing media figures, people entrenched in the kind of Trump orbit, were desperate to contact him, to plead with him, to tell these people to stop doing this. So there was, you know, several of his cabinet people resigned over it. There was tremendous bipartisan outrage. What happened over time is what happens to every issue in our country. The pandemic, any news story, anything that happens gets filtered into a tribal partisan lens. And that is partly the responsibility of our, you know, divisive media, which pulls people apart. I think it's largely the responsibility of the divisive media. But it's something we need to overcome. There is no reason we have to be at each other's throats over this. It was bad and should be condemned as such. It was not the end of the country. It was not akin to 9/11 or Pearl Harbor or anything like that, but it was bad, and it should be called out as bad.
Let's look forward a little, Robbie. 83%, I'm sure you saw this poll, of people who responded said they're concerned about the future of democracy in this country. I thought that number was pretty frightening. I think overall, a lot of us never thought we would see something like what happened on January 6th. Do you really think it could happen again?
Well, I don't think that exact thing will happen again. Although it is true, though, that, and many, you know, kind of defending Trump will say this, but this part is true. There were other riots. I live in Washington, D.C., and what happened to the Capitol was terrible, but it was worse. But there's smashing of windows, the Black Lives Matter protesters marching through many cities in America, smashing windows, setting things on fire, looting stores. All of that was bad and probably should have been condemned a little bit more forcefully. Obviously, this was even worse than that, but right. I think we need to tamp down a little bit on the political rhetoric, especially when it's your side. Don't excuse the violence and the destruction when it's your people doing it. Don't make excuses for them. You have to condemn your own side, or else it just seems partisan. That's what I would like to see more of, and that's Robbie, how we'll prevent it in the future.
Robbie Suave, senior editor at Reason Magazine. Great to see you again. Take care.
Thank you.
The New York Times has said this, and we have as well here on the broadcast, the Capitol riot, essentially just another wedge in an already divided nation, and our politicians on both sides maybe not helping. This morning, the president addressed the nation and accused former President Trump and his allies of holding a dagger to the throat of democracy. Joining me now, good friends of the show. It's good to have them back. Rochelle Ritchie, former House Democratic Policy Communications Committee press secretary, and former Illinois Republican Party chairman, Pat Brady. Pat, I will get to you in a minute. But Rochelle,
I've got a beat, right?
That's right. Let's start with you. I guess the first question is, did the president miss an opportunity maybe to unite people more today instead of going after Trump as hard as he did?
I think so, and I really did agree a lot with what Robbie had to say, and the fact that the media has done a very poor job in trying to unite people under this issue. This is an issue. This was a threat to people's lives at the Capitol. This was not a Republican or Democrat issue, and the fact that it is being portrayed as such is why you have so many people that are divided about what it is. Is it a threat to our democracy? And I think that it's a little aggressive to compare this to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor and the other, unfortunate incidents that we've had where thousands of people have died. Now, people obviously did die during this insurrection, but I do think it's a little aggressive to say that this was something that I would never, ever compare this to 9/11. But my biggest question is, with this investigation and all that is happening, what comes of this? What is the punishment for the politicians or the president who are accused of inciting this sort of violence? What is really going to happen?
You're the former prosecutor. What happens?
Yeah, I disagree. I think, and you watch this, and the Confederate flag flew in the United States Capitol, which is probably the most important institution for democracy, not only in the United States of America, but in the world. Every one of these people that was involved in this needs to go to the penitentiary, not for a year, for 10 years. To me, this is treason. This is an insurrection. They were trying to get Mike Pence to not validate the election. What else is that? They're trying to take over the government. They're trying to keep a president in that wasn't voted in by the democratic system. This was a horrible event. It's every bit as bad as anything that's ever happened in this country. And I hope every one of these people that reviled this spends a lot of time in the penitentiary.
Let's listen to more of what the president had to say today.
To uphold the will of the people. They were looking to deny the will of the people. The former president of the United States of America has created and spread a web of lies about the 2020 election. He's not just a former president. He's a defeated former president. In life, there's truth, and tragically, there are lies. Lies conceived and spread for profit and power.
I'm a little confused after your first answers. Have you guys switched parties by any chance?
No.
That's horrible.
I mean, he's the president of the United States, and we're talking about going forward in this, leading this country going forward after this terrible incident. And he's still playing partisan politics with it.
And that's what I mean, as far as like the way that it's being discussed is still continuing the division. It's definitely a violent act. Definitely don't want to see the Confederate flag flying through our Capitol. But at the same time, how is the current president going to unite the nation around this issue as opposed to causing more division about it?
And this just incites the base of the Republican Party. They've never learned the lesson that forget about Trump if you're a Democrat. This just gins it up for him. So I don't understand. First of all, why did I think he just swung and a miss on the speech, And secondly, why bring it up? It just fires up Republicans.
Republicans haven't forgotten about it. And this is what led to all of this. The narrative that the election not only was stolen, but that it could be overturned. That's how we got to this.
Well, Trump led that. But
a lot of people still believe it.
Well, they do. But most Americans right now, most Republicans anyway, I think with Trump, we can talk about this forever or we can move on. If he wants to talk about this forever, he's not going to win the nomination. We need to look forward if we're going to win.
But you do have a lot of Republicans that are still sort of toting the big lie. Across the press. They're saying that it was stolen. They're sort of supporting Trump. And what's unfortunate is that you do have some sensible Republicans like Pat. You do have some sensible Republicans that are like, this is wrong. But the problem is that Republicans like Pat are coming out and speaking up against this, but you have those that are silent, and their silence makes them complicit in what is happening. And that is because what's happened is that Republicans are in Congress currently are saying, if I go against the big lie, if I come out and I denounce this, I could potentially lose my seat. I'm not going to raise any money.
Former President Trump continues to double and triple down on this, saying today in a statement, never forget the crime of the 2020 presidential election and never give up. To me, in the end, moving forward, the most troubling thing here is that a lot of people in this country, and I guess you could argue millions of them, don't trust the election system. And that's problematic.
Well, the election system, I think, has always been questionable, particularly for Black Americans in this country. Voting rights, it's always been a thing. This to me is different than the fight for voting rights. This was basically people upset, high off of Trump, high off of God knows what else, while they were out there fighting and rioting for something that they believed from a man. It wasn't the system. They believed Trump. They didn't necessarily believe that the system was broken. We've been saying that the system was broken for dozens and dozens of years. These people were following the line of Trump. And I don't know why anybody is actually kind of surprised that Trump would even incite something like this, because he's proven who he is time and time again. And I get that a lot of people that used to work for Trump are now coming out and they're cooperating with the investigation. But I'm like, you people knew who he was before you started working for him.
Pat, I'll give you the last word.
Trump didn't hold a gun to that people's heads that crawled up, that scaled up the Capitol and broke the windows, and the police officers got killed, and all the bad scenes we saw. All these people acted on their own will. Listen, I'm not defending Trump at all. This isn't a Republican issue or Democrat issue for me. This is a United States of America issue. Every one of those people that did it that day needs to go to the penitentiary.
All right, Rochelle Ritchie, former House Democratic Policy Communications Committee press secretary, and former Illinois Republican Party Chairman Pat Brady. It's great to see you both again.
Good to see
Thanks
you
for
too.
the time. Well, we often ask on this broadcast, is anyone listening to the COVID rules anymore? We thought the answer was pretty much no, and now we have a little more proof. 3 cruise ships set sail from Miami packed with passengers. What COVID? That story's ahead. Not even President Biden listening to COVID experts, at least according to members of his COVID team. We'll tell you what they say the president should be doing, but isn't. Also, Antonio Brown says he didn't quit and has the evidence to prove it. His coach says otherwise. It's become a soap opera, but we can't resist talking about it ourselves, and we'll do that next with former Pro Bowl running back Tiki Barber. He'll join us, close friends with Bucs coach Bruce Arians. We'll talk about that next. New information tonight on the continuing saga of NFL wide receiver Antonio Brown. After days of speculation, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers officially let the 7-time Pro Bowler go today. The wide receiver says the team fired him after he refused to play while injured. Brown released a statement through his attorney saying he had a painful ankle injury. Brown says he told Coach Bruce Arians he couldn't play because of the injury. He says the coach ordered him on the field and Brown refused. Brown's statement reads in part, "I'm reflecting on my reaction, but there was a trigger. The trigger was someone telling me that I'm not allowed to feel pain. I acknowledge my past, but my past does not make me a second-class citizen. My past does not forfeit my right to be heard when I am in pain." Joining me now, NFL legend, former running back for the New York Giants, Tiki Barber. Tiki, it's been a while since we've seen you. It's good to have you back. This is yet another thing that is, I guess, leading to different opinions. Some people say Antonio Brown's just not a good teammate. He's problematic. Others say he's got some issues going on. We need to have compassion. Which is it?
Well, I think it might be a little bit of both, and it's great to see you again as well, Joe. Happy New Year. Antonio Brown is such a complicated figure because there was a time 3 or 4 years ago when he was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and just because he could play, you deal with some of the issues that came off the field, whether it was the distractions in the locker room or the social media posts. But since that time, he's now 32 years old, almost 33 years old, it becomes less tolerable when things like this happen. And we make a snap judgment on what we see because it looks crazy. I mean, who takes your shoulder pads off and throws her shirt in the stands and runs across the field? But as the days have gone on, we've realized what actually was going on. Antonio Brown didn't feel like he could play, and Bruce Arians, who you mentioned, I know really well from years of being in the NFL. He's also roommates with my dad in college. He wanted Antonio Brown out on the field. When he felt like he couldn't go, and mainly because he wasn't getting a lot of touches, he didn't feel invigorated to play through the pain, he said, "I can't." And that's when Bruce Arians said, "Get out of here." And we all know what happened after that.
Right. Let's hear a little bit more from the coach, Bruce Arians. He talked today more about what happened, and here's some of it.
At no point in time during that game did he ever ask the trainer or doctor about his ankle. He never went through, that's the normal protocol. You go through protocols during games. I was never notified of it. You can't force a player to play. You can't force a player to play. I mean, they have that choice. It's their body.
So, Tiki, he said the players know the truth. I'm not sure what that means, but what do you make of this whole injury thing? Is this how this typically goes down? If you're hurt, you go to the staff and say, "I can't go," or what?
It's interesting, Joe, because, for instance, 2000, I broke my forearm. I easily could have said, you know what, I'm not going to play. But I wanted to play. I wanted to give a team a chance to win and try to get to a Super Bowl. Ultimately, we did, and I played a couple of games with a broken arm. This is what I'm saying. Antonio Brown has a fracture in his ankle, which maybe the Bruce Arians knew about or didn't know about. That's beside the point. But if Antonio Brown was feeling used and valued for this Buccaneers team, he likely would have played hurt. And so this is where it gets complicated interpretation-wise. As Bruce Arians, the head coach, knows he probably has some issues, but Antonio Brown's not telling the trainer, "I can't play." He's just telling Bruce Arians, "I don't want to play." And so what happens in lost communication is two different sides of the same story. And the crazy thing, Joe, is that they both might be right. And that's what makes it complicated. The reason it took so long for them to release him is because they likely had to go through an injury settlement. When someone gets hurt and the team no longer wants to play with him, you can't just say, see ya, right? It's an at-will employee profession. So if you lose skill or they just don't like you, they can cut you unless you're injured. That's why it took so long for them to ultimately release Antonio Brown. There probably was some settlement here.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure. I thought maybe there was a chance they might make up, but that was proven wrong.
I did too.
Interesting.
I did too, honestly.
All right, so my other question on this, Tiki, was if he was hurt, why was he dressed? Because typically if you're dressed, that means you can play. But I think to Antonio's point, he's claiming now that he got some sort of an injection that the NFL Players Association said maybe wasn't a good idea. So, and he also had 2 catches. So the question becomes, did he get hurt during the game to where he couldn't go? Or was it a matter of what Coach Arians is saying is that he was complaining that he wasn't getting enough touches?
Yeah, so Joe, this is an old cliche in the NFL. Shoot it up with Toradol. You know, you stick a needle in, it's got a painkiller, you don't feel any pain, which actually is a way to cause more damage if you're actually hurt. But he was cleared to play by the doctors. The other side of the story is that the Tampa Bay doctors wanted him to go see an extra out-of-office third opinion or second opinion, and he refused to do it. But come game day, you work out before. We see it all the time. You go to a football game, guys are running around on the field. There's a trainer out there. How do you feel? You feel good? Great. All right, let's go. Let's tape it up and go play the game. He went through that entire process, said he felt fine, obviously, otherwise he wouldn't have been dressed, and then came out and started to play. As the game went on, and they were losing big at that point. Let's not forget, they were losing to the Jets, which was a little bit surprising for a lot of people, 24-10, and he wasn't being utilized. That's when he started to feel pain in his ankle and said he didn't want to play, and we all know what transpired after that.
Yeah, then the Bucks did come back to win that game, by the way, as well. So what do you think happens from here, Tiki? Where does he go? Do you think another team takes a flyer on him?
I mean, I've long been on the record saying it's not worth it. But we saw that it was worth it last year for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as Antonio Brown, after all of the issues from the driver at his house to the potential jail sentence that he had to serve, the sexual assault, he got cleared of that, was suspended for 8 games, and came back and helped the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In fact, he was integral in helping the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win a Super Bowl. So it was worth it from that football standpoint. But if you're someone else, are you willing to deal with it? If you don't have a quarterback who's strong-minded like Tom Brady is, if you don't have a head coach like Bruce Arians who kind of is, I don't care, I'm going to do it my way whether you like it or not, I'm not sure it works in a lot of places around the NFL. But will someone give him a shot? If he's healthy and can play, you better believe they will.
Hey, on the way out, before we let you go, Tiki, New York football is booming this season, as you well know. You mentioned the Jets. So if you had to hitch your wagon to either the Giants or the Jets, who would it be?
I mean, I got to say the Giants. I'm playing with the Giants, Joe. And I'm trying to, will them into success again. But honestly, the Jets are starting to show some promise. Their quarterback looks really good. Looks like they have the right coaching staff in place. I think the Jets get better before the Giants, but I'm always rooting for the Giants, Joe. You know that.
How did I know you were going to say that? Former running back and a great for the New York Giants, Tiki Barber. Tiki, again, it's great to have you. Thanks for the time.
Appreciate you, Joe. Be well and see you soon.
You too. Well, we can't get enough of this video. Migrants crossing the border in Arizona as the governor was holding a news conference about migrants crossing illegally. Up next, the mayor of that town, Yuma, Arizona, says they're being overwhelmed. How's he handling it? We'll ask him next. Two days after the CDC advised against all travel on cruise ships, thousands of cruisers are still partying like it's 2019. Ships are sailing, guests are embarking, even as the CDC says it's open investigations now on 92 ships as the Omicron variant is fueling a spike in COVID cases. NewsNation's Brian Enton is live for us tonight in Miami. So, Brian, are they not listening to the guidance or do they just not care?
I guess both. They're not listening. Some of them told us they hadn't heard the guidance. And then other passengers that we talked to said, yes, we heard that the CDC is now saying do not go on cruises, and we just don't care. everyone we talked to today getting on these ships, and there were 4 or 5 different cruise ships that left Miami this evening, they all said they were fully vaccinated and boosted. They had their masks with them, and they said no one is going to stop us from getting on this cruise ship. We are sick of being in our houses. We've had this booked for quite some time, and we're ready to get out and go. Listen to what some of them told me.
Carnival has been pretty good with following all the protocols and having things in place.
Are you nervous at all to get on the ship with the pandemic?
No. No, I'm excited.
Tell me about that. Why no nerves?
I mean, I've been a million places. I've been to Islands of Adventure, SeaWorld, all the places where there's millions of people everywhere in the past 6 months, and we've been fine.
And the CDC right now saying they do not advise anyone to get on a cruise ship, even if you are fully vaccinated. The cruise lines have sort of fought back against that, saying when you look at the numbers overall, there has not been a serious problem on cruise ships over the last 6 months or so. Joe?
We all remember that's where it started as well, Brian. But I'm curious, I mean, there have been health issues with cruise ships for years. I mean, we all remember the norovirus issues and other problems, but there seems like there's just sort of this cruise culture where they're in, and especially now, they're ready to go.
Yeah, you either love or hate them, Joe, and if you hate them, it's like, I'm never getting on a cruise ship. If you love cruises, you're going to go no matter what. And I was just thinking, being here at the port today, I mean, there's all of these new ships. They're building new ships. They're building new cruise terminals here at the port as we speak, despite having really making no money over the last 2 years. They obviously know that these cruisers are coming back, and from what we saw today, they're already coming back.
Always great perspective from our friend Brian Enton, live for us tonight in Florida. Brian, thanks. Take care.
Thanks, Joe.
And now, with cases surging all over the country, health advisors on President Biden's transition team are calling on him to rethink his COVID strategy. In 3 opinion articles published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, they're calling for Mr. Biden to adopt an entirely new domestic pandemic strategy, one that is geared to the new normal of living with the virus, not trying to wipe it out. I want to turn now to our friend Dr. Bob Lahita of St. Joseph's Health and author of Immunity Strong. So, Doctor, do you agree with that?
I agree with that, Joe. I think we have to learn to live with this virus. We can't be injecting our everybody with 4th and 5th shots every so many months. So we're going to learn to live with it. The Omicron variant, the good news is it's infecting people, but not causing significant clinical disease and death from what we can see, although the Delta variant is still around, and that's still a big troublemaker. So being vaccinated and getting the booster is a sure way to protect yourself from the Omicron variant and also from the Delta variant. So it's really important.
It doesn't seem like we're getting there, though, Doctor, does it? I mean, to me, how do we do this to learn to live with it? Because a lot of people are still worried and afraid. And I think from the beginning of this thing, since you and I have been talking, we've always said the same thing. Get the shot, wear the mask, keep your distance, and get on with your lives.
Right. But this Omicron variant, and perhaps new variants, which I hope don't come, but this variant is causing or may cause herd immunity because it is so widespread. You know, we have had over 1,400,000 cases a day that we're testing positive. Of course, the government is saying, well, don't look at those. Look at people who are in the hospital, people who are in the ICU. And that's a good measure. We should not be counting the millions of people who are infected, because as far as I'm concerned, I know so many people who are infected. It seems like this virus is everywhere right now.
So does it burn out as a result, Doctor? Does it burn out?
Well, if we get over 80% immunity, either from infection or from vaccination, we will then achieve what we call herd immunity, which means it will not be profitable for the virus to infect us and replicate. There'll just be nobody to infect because we will have significant protection. And for those who are vaccinated that get infected, as you know, they wind up with cold-like symptoms, a stuffy nose, a terrible sore throat, fevers, muscle aches, but it goes away in about 3 days.
Well, I can't believe we aren't close to herd, Doctor, just considering how many people are vaccinated now in the country. And as you said, how many people have now had it. But I guess we're still not quite there. Let's talk quickly about flu-rona and other things. Are these things we have to worry about? I mean, really?
Yeah, Flurona. Yes, we do, because this is one that affects children as well as adults. And why is that? Because the flu is a respiratory virus, and it also spreads like wildfire among people and children. And actually, when I advised for people to get the booster shot, as did many other scientists and physicians, we suggested that you also get the flu shot at the same time, or at least perhaps a week to 2 weeks later. So it's very important to protect yourself against the flu. And believe it or not, there are people out there that have both infections, many of them children.
Speaking of children, Doctor, I just have 10 seconds left. Schools should remain open or not?
Remain open. It's more important for the kids to get a live education than to stay home, and some of them don't have access to Wi-Fi, etc. And it's important that they socialize. A child has to have friends and talk to them and be instructed live by vaccinated teachers.
Every medical voice I've heard said the same thing. Dr. Bob Lahita, it's always good to have you. Thanks for the time.
Good to see you, Joe.
Shifting gears now to the southern border, where Border Patrol apprehended more than 1.8 million migrants last year. Former DHS officials are now warning the ongoing border crisis is leading to an increase in human trafficking, specifically in Florida. The U.S. Coast Guard has returned 119 Cuban migrants to their home island after they were swept up in 12 separate operations in just 3 days. They were trying to arrive by sea. Meantime, in Yuma, Arizona, the mayor says his city is overwhelmed by the ongoing crisis at the southern border. And the mayor joins us right now, Mayor Douglas Nichols. Mayor, thank you for the time. What are you seeing now in Yuma that we're not, or that we're not hearing about maybe?
Well, there's actually been a shift in traffic through the Yuma area. So last fiscal year, you talk about numbers, the Yuma sector had 140,000 people come through the Border Patrol system here. That was a second highest all-time number, but it was really only about 9 months of activity. So if we got in 12 months of activity, we would have been ahead of that. This year, we're on pace for 20 to 25,000 people a month, which will put us over 250,000 people for this year. Not only is that an alarming change, we also have people are actually looking to evade Border Patrol a little bit more now than they were previously. And so they're ending up trying to work around the system. So we have an even tougher time understanding who's coming into the country than we have even just a couple months ago.
What are the biggest challenges for you in Yuma, Mayor, when you talk about numbers like that, 20 to 25,000 a month?
The challenges are when they come into the community and they don't have resources, they don't know where they're going. How does that impact the community from our homeless shelter to some of our, even the police station and the fire station where they show up, and some of the minor crimes that they end up in the middle of while they're trying to traverse the way through the community. So those are the things that really have me concerned. You know, if Border Patrol had the resources and had the capability, and the numbers were dropping to fully contain the situation at the border and do the border security mission that they were created to do, I would be a lot more comfortable. At this point, we're not seeing that, and Border Patrol is having a very difficult time doing the security mission on the border, because it gets distracted with the immigration mission.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. How much of this is a federal issue, and how much of it is up to you as a city?
It's 100% a federal issue. I'd make that extremely clear. We're, as a community, we're not doing anything to encourage people to come here. We obviously don't control the border. Those are the things that the federal government does. And we are just the location on the border where people have been coming through. Border Patrol sector headquarters is here. And so as people are released, it's about what's happening here. So the community is not part of what's happening. It's just more of the result and the after effect of it.
I read where you said you don't have the resources to handle this. What do you need? What are you looking for?
Well, we need more security at the border. We need to make sure that whatever traffic is coming through is able to be contained and not brought through the middle of the community. Should there be humanitarian issues, we need to make sure those are taken care of. Yes, we're in the desert and it gets hot, but we're in the winter now and it gets extremely cold. So those kind of things need to be taken care of so we don't have a huge humanitarian issue as we deal with this locally. But ultimately, until we get a secure border, until we have immigration policies that work, that Congress passes laws that are updated to today, this is going to be an issue for a long time. It's just how is it managed by DHS, the DHS secretary.
Right, and it has been an issue for decades, as we've documented here on this broadcast. Yuma, Arizona Mayor Douglas Nichols. Mayor, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Teachers in Chicago may be off the job for a third day in a row. In fact, we just found out they will be. School is out again tomorrow. Up next, possible solution for the embattled mayor. Could it work?
We will not relent. Enough is enough. We are standing firm, and we are going to fight to get our kids back in-person learning.
That was Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, fired up, saying enough is enough. Regardless, Chicago Public Schools have just now canceled classes for a third day in a row tomorrow. That just crossing a few minutes ago. The teachers union has essentially walked out over concerns over Omicron. Joining me now for more, two voices of Chicago, former Chicago Superintendent of Schools, Paul Vallis, and the host of the Chicago Way podcast, John Cass. Paul, let's start with you first here. I know you've been thinking a lot about what happens next. We just found out no school tomorrow. What's the answer here? How do we solve this?
Well, it's simple. Four things the mayor needs to do, and she can do unilaterally. One is no work, no pay, period. You don't show up at school, you don't get paid, and dig in and not back off. The second thing is void or threaten to void the Chicago Teachers Union contract, the most expensive contract in its history, because they're violating the contract, and they're also violating the state mandate that schools be open to in-school instruction. So violate that contract. The third thing that they should do is immediately lift the cap on charter schools, because the union forced the district to cap charter school enrollment because they don't want competition. And the fourth thing is use that TIF surplus, that tax increment financing revenue surplus, that bonus surplus that they gave the district, and use that money to provide tuition support for parents who want to take their kids out of the public schools and send their kids to parochial private schools. So for that matter, even poor parents who are currently sending their kids to schools.
John, this was a suggestion that you made in your most recent post on John Cass News. You think this works? How many students do you think could potentially leave if this is an option? They're doing it in Arizona, right?
The more, the better. The system doesn't work, Joe. You're here. You were here. You understand the system. It doesn't work. It's broken. I'd say it's racist, and it's morally indefensible what they're doing. These children, particularly black and brown children and others who are of low income, should not be stuck in this system. Let them out.
John, if there are 340,000 kids in the district, and let's just say 10% of them want to do this, that's 34,000 kids. Where do they all go? It's not like private schools have room for all these kids.
Well, there's a lot of, you know what? You create competition. Other schools will grow. Other schools will crop up. They have $27,000 per student. That's how they spend a lot of money in the public schools. And it's ridiculous what they're doing. And this thing that Lori Lightfoot, screaming, she sounds like, where's the strawberries? She sounds like Captain Queeg. Look, they have walked all over her for years. This is the Chicago Teachers Union. They're good political operatives. They're great political operatives, but they've been slapping her around, and she keeps caving again and again.
Yeah. Paul, is this an option, the choice? You mentioned it there, number 4.
Yeah, Joe, look, the bottom line is they're going to go back to the classroom eventually. They're going to hold out. I think they were trying to hold out until the 18th. They're going to try to get their way. They'll eventually be back in the classroom. But, you got to think the long game now. First of all, you have to let them know that this contract's going to be voided and that they're not going to get paid for the days that they don't show up for work. But I think the long game is for them to lift the cap on charters, public school choice charters, and to basically say, we are going to provide your share of the per pupil funding, we're going to provide you with a tuition subsidy. So if you want to send your kids, or if you're currently sending your kids to parochial and private schools, we're going to provide for that education. They're doing that in Indiana, by the way.
Has there been any indication that she's in favor of that?
Oh, she won't do any of those things.
4 solutions that will never happen.
No, but you know, she can do this unilaterally. See, this is the beauty of it.
Right.
She can do that unilaterally.
Is the union in breach of contract here?
I believe that they're in breach of contract, and I think they're violating. Remember when the governor picked on little Timothy Christian school because they defied the mask mandate, and he took their certification away or their accreditation away? Well, hey, listen, the biggest teacher union in the state just defied your state board of education, which said you've got to have in-school instruction. They just defied you. What are you going to do about them? You're going to move to decertify the union?
Wow.
I mean, do something, for heaven's sake.
John, where do you think this ends?
It ends with the mayoral election, which has already begun. She can't raise money. The guy sitting next to you, I think he's going to run. I keep telling him not to run.
Why not? He ran once and did pretty well, actually.
Yeah, well,
I have no doubt that he's the only one who could do the job. But this town is so crooked that these business leaders won't pony up and give him the money he needs because he won't be bought. And I don't want him to get hurt.
Well, first of all, John, I appreciate that. But look, you know, I've been commenting on these issues for years.
Right.
And I've been talking about school choice since we rebuilt New Orleans after Katrina and used it as an opportunity to create 100% school choice district. And those schools have never been better. So, you know, I'm not doing this because I'm a candidate. I'm doing this because somebody needs to point out that there are clear pathways. And the mayor has the executive authority. Listen, they've insulted her. They're offending her. Shut me up. Do something. You've got the power to do the things that I've articulated. Do it. You'll send a signal to them. You'll get the schools open, but you'll at least be able to begin to move towards a system of school choice so that parents can decide what type of schools they want to send their kids to.
The other thing someone said to me today, John, was the hypocritical nature of the union's position here. They wonder, are the teachers going grocery shopping? Are they going to the dentist? Are they, doctors are working, nurses are working, police officers are working. We're vaccinated and masked up and off we go, just not teachers, though.
I love teachers. I'm married to one, and I'm the father of a teacher. So we value teachers in our family.
Right.
But listen, you've got people going to, all the deli workers were working, slicing ham and turkey and cheese. And these teachers would sit, Zoom at work and then go over and get some cheese, ham and cheese for their sandwiches at home. Who worked all this time?
Right.
The deli workers, the coppers.
They are. John, let me jump in because we're out of time. And Paul, I got 10 seconds for you. That's it. Wrap us up.
Yeah, Joe, once again, children are minimally impacted. In fact, 145 homicides, 18-years and younger, seven deaths linked to COVID. And every death is a tragedy.
Right.
But let me point out that 91% of the teachers in Rising are vaccinated.
Right.
I mean, go back to school, go back to work. These kids need to be in school.
All right, Paul Vallis, former superintendent of schools here in Chicago and also host of the Chicago Way podcast, John Cass. Thank you both, gentlemen. Tonight, we honor a World War II veteran who lived to be 112. It's our American Snapshot next. Tonight's American Snapshot honors a World War II veteran who died Tuesday at 112 years old. We keep his thoughts and our prayers with him and his family and thank him for his service as well. That's our time. Leland is next. On Balance, coming up at the top. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.